They called him the proof of Islam, a man of brilliance, prestige, and doubt. He questioned everything, his knowledge, his fame, even his faith. And in that crisis, he found clarity. What he discovered reshaped the future of Islamic thought forever. Dramatic cinematic background music begins softly, builds slowly. They called him the proof of Islam, a man of brilliance, prestige, and doubt. He questioned everything, his knowledge, his fame, even his faith. And in that crisis, he found clarity. What he discovered reshaped the future of Islamic thought forever. A candle flickering over parchment, old Arabic manuscripts being opened. Scholars debating in a madrasa, Al-Ghazali walking alone through a misty street, dramatic reenactment-style shot. A silhouette entering a grand library zoom in on the words Ihya Ulum al-Din, written in gold calligraphy, fade to black. This is the journey of Imam Al-Ghazali. A wide shot of the Persian countryside in the 11th century, sun rising over Tus. Our story begins in the year 1058, in the quiet city of Tus, nestled in the heart of Persia, modern-day Iran. Young boy walking through narrow streets, glimpses of a modest home. Born into a simple family, Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Ghazali was just a child when his father passed away. But his father, though poor, left behind something more valuable than gold, a love for knowledge. And with that, he entrusted his sons to a friend, a righteous man who would send young al-Ghazali to study. Transition to scenes of a small village madrasa, children reciting Quran, writing on wooden tablets. From a young age, al-Ghazali showed remarkable brilliance. He mastered the Quran, excelled in Islamic jurisprudence, and began to explore deeper questions of theology and philosophy. Time-lapse of him reading by candlelight, flipping through thick books, growing older. His pursuit of knowledge would take him far beyond Tus to the great learning centers of the Islamic world. Panoramic shot of Nisabur, Nishapur, scholars walking into lecture halls. In Nishapur, he studied under the legendary Imam Al-Juwayni, known as the Imam of the Haramain, the greatest scholar of his time. A dramatic reenactment. Al-Ghazali sits among eager students as the elder Imam lectures. Under his guidance, Al-Ghazali didn't just memorize, he questioned, debated, and expanded. By his late 20s, his name was already echoing through the intellectual circles of the Muslim world. Al-Ghazali standing in front of scrolls and books, deep in thought. A golden sunrise over Baghdad, birds flying above domes and minarets, scholars walking into a grand institution. By the age of 34, Imam Al-Ghazali had reached what most scholars could only dream of. Exterior of the Grand Nizamiya of Baghdad, bustling with students and activity. He was appointed chief professor at the Nizamiya of Baghdad, the most prestigious Islamic university of the time. Inside the lecture hall, a packed audience of students. Al-Ghazali stands before them, calm and composed, teaching with authority. With every lecture, his fame grew. He didn't just repeat knowledge, he challenged minds, blending logic, law, and spirituality. His writings and debates earned him admiration across the Islamic world, from scholars in Andalusia to mystics in Central Asia. Map animations showing Baghdad and arrows spreading out across the Islamic world. But his influence wasn't limited to the scholarly world. Grand Court of the Seljuk Empire, ministers, generals, and advisors in discussion. Al-Ghazali sits among them. He became closely associated with political elites, including the powerful Seljuk vizier Nizam al-Mulk. His voice reached palaces as easily as it reached mosques. Scenes of elegant gatherings, scholars in robes sipping tea, exchanging ideas. As one of the top scholars in the empire, Al-Ghazali had access to luxury. He lived in elite scholarly circles, received stipends from the state, and was often gifted by patrons. Al-Ghazali being handed a fine cloak or a rare book, walking in a peaceful garden with students. He wore refined garments and attended the courts of the elite. Al-Ghazali walking past a merchant, giving charity discreetly. But yet despite the wealth and admiration, he was known for his modesty, often quiet, often distant, as if searching for something beyond this world. Al-Ghazali at his desk, writing, then staring out a window, lost in thought. But behind the brilliance and recognition, a storm was brewing in his soul. Candlelit room. Imam Al-Ghazali sits alone, deep in thought, surrounded by books and scrolls. His eyes are heavy, face weary. He had everything: status, wealth, fame, and admiration. But inside he felt hollow. Slow pan across ancient texts, then to a blurred reflection in a bowl of water. A storm was building within Imam Al-Ghazali, a crisis not of the intellect, but of the soul. He began to question the sincerity of his intentions. Was his knowledge for God or for praise? Were his words a path to truth or a performance for status? Imam walking through a crowded courtyard, voices fade and blur around him. He's lost in his own mind. The pressure consumed him until one day his voice simply stopped. He could no longer speak, not from illness, but from spiritual exhaustion. A simple bag packed, ink-stained hands rolling up scrolls. He quietly leaves a grand building in the early dawn. Then, without warning, he vanished. Under the pretense of performing Hajj, he left Baghdad. He gave up his titles, his wealth, and his prestige, and began a journey of solitude, silence, and self-purification. Dusty roads, mosques at sunset, quiet mountain passes. Al-Ghazali praying alone under the stars. For over 10 years, Al-Ghazali wandered as an ascetic, living in Damascus, praying in the Umayyad Mosque, teaching quietly in Jerusalem, reflecting in the deserts of the Hijaz, and finally returning to his hometown of Tus. Al-Ghazali sitting in a quiet room, writing slowly with a peaceful face. He had left the world to find the truth within himself, and in that stillness, he discovered what neither fame nor philosophy could offer: a heart illuminated by sincerity. Peaceful village scenes in Tus, children playing in a courtyard, a scholar walking home with scrolls under his arm. In the midst of his quest for knowledge and spiritual truth, Imam Al-Ghazali also lived the quiet life of a family man. Reenactment of Al-Ghazali entering a modest home, greeted by smiling children and a veiled woman, his wife. He was married, and though little is known about his wife, sources describe her as a private and deeply religious woman, reflective of his own spiritual path. Interior of a simple home, lamps glowing, children listening to their father as he teaches them softly. He had several children, though exact numbers remain unclear. What we do know is that at least one of his sons followed in his footsteps, studying under his guidance and preserving some of his father's teachings. Father and son studying together, writing side by side, surrounded by books. During his later years in Tus, Al-Ghazali lived away from the spotlight. No longer the celebrated professor of Baghdad, he was now a quiet teacher, a writer, a father. Al-Ghazali in a garden, walking with his son. Children's laughter echoes in the background. It was here, in the stillness of home and the rhythm of family, that he continued his life's true work, reviving the heart of Islam. A hand slowly opens a centuries-old manuscript. The title shimmers in gold, Ihya Ulum al-Din. Among the many gifts Imam Al-Ghazali left to the world, none was greater than his magnum opus. Pages flipping in slow motion, Arabic calligraphy beautifully inscribed. Ihya Ulum al-Din, the revival of the religious sciences, a work that would forever change how Muslims understood their faith. Split-screen imagery, on one side, a jurist studying legal texts, on the other, a Sufi in deep prayer. In an age divided by extremes, between rigid literalism and blind rationalism, Al-Ghazali offered a middle path. He brought the soul back to scholarship, the heart back to worship, the intention back to action. Visual quotes from the Ihya on sincerity, ikhlas, humility, and the purification of the heart. The Ihya covered everything: belief, ethics, worship, social conduct. It wasn't just a book. It was a manual for living a God-conscious life. Scholars across different centuries reading his works, from Andalusia to modern-day Cairo. But Al-Ghazali didn't stop there. Close-ups of other major works being stacked or placed side by side. In Tahafut al-Falasifa, The Incoherence of the Philosophers, He boldly challenged the unchecked rationalism of his time, particularly the views of thinkers like Ibn Sina. In Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, Deliverance from Error, he told the story of his own spiritual crisis, an autobiography of the soul. And in Mishkat al-Anwar, The Niche of Lights, he explored divine metaphysics through Quranic symbolism. Light shining through a patterned window, symbolizing spiritual insight. A child reciting in a madrasa. These books weren't just intellectual exercises. They were blueprints for a balanced and sincere life, rooted in the Quran and Sunnah, but illuminated by inner wisdom. Modern classrooms, madrasas, and universities. Young scholars reading the Ihya, highlighting passages, taking notes. To this day, his books are studied in madrasas around the world. From Fez to Jakarta, his legacy lives on. A dusty copy of the Ihya being placed on a shelf next to modern texts. Fade to black, the quiet streets of Tus at sunrise. A modest madrasa courtyard, students gathering. In his final years, Imam Al-Ghazali returned to his roots. Older Al-Ghazali teaching young students in a small circle, calm and serene. No longer surrounded by empire or elite, he taught quietly in his hometown of Tus, guiding students, writing, and mentoring those who sought not just knowledge, but truth. Scrolls being written, candles flickering, his bookshelf filling with handwritten works. Even in his final days, the pen never left his hand. The heart never left his Lord. A slow walk through a garden at sunset, Al-Ghazali in deep prayer. On December 18th, 1111 CE, at just 53 years old, Imam Al-Ghazali returned to the one he had spent his life seeking. A single candle goes out, soft fade to a gravesite in Tus. O soul, your return is to your Lord. So be prepared. A quiet, modest room filled with scrolls, books, and a simple desk. Imam al-Ghazali was not a man who sought wealth. His focus was always on knowledge, truth, and the inner journey. The Nizamiya of Baghdad, students gather around a young al-Ghazali who receives a stipend from the state. As the chief professor at the Nizamiya of Baghdad, he earned generous stipends, sufficient to live comfortably by the standards of his time. Gold coins, fine clothes, and luxurious books, symbolizing wealth. But his wealth wasn't spent on luxury or extravagance. Instead, much of it went into his works, the acquisition of books, and charity to support the poor and his students. Al-Ghazali discreetly giving charity to the poor, students reading his works. In his later years, however, he gave up much of this wealth. He chose an ascetic lifestyle, living simply and wandering in search of spiritual truth. Al-Ghazali walking through the desert, a simple robe on his back, looking toward the horizon. By the time of his death, Al-Ghazali likely had moderate wealth, mostly invested in knowledge and the education of others. The rest was given to charity, leaving behind a legacy far richer than any material possession. Books being handed out to students, a simple grave in Tus. In the end, his true wealth was not in gold or land, but in the hearts he touched and the minds he inspired. A wide shot of scholars in a mosque, diverse groups of people praying together, blending different schools of thought. Imam al-Ghazali's legacy is as vast as it is enduring. His works bridge the gap between scholars, mystics, and common believers, uniting a diverse Muslim world through shared wisdom. Scenes of different scholars, an Orthodox jurist, a Sufi mystic, and a student in a madrasa, all reading Ihya Ulum al-Din. His teachings didn't just remain confined to academic circles. His works reached the hearts of everyday Muslims, influencing how they lived their faith. A wide view of a bustling mosque, people of different cultures and walks of life reading his books. He is honored by Sunnis, Sufis, and even some Shia traditions, his influence transcending sects and schools of thought. Scholars from different backgrounds citing his works, vibrant cultural scenes across the Muslim world, from the streets of Cairo to the markets of Istanbul. For his profound contributions to Islamic thought, Al-Ghazali was often called Hujjat al-Islam, the proof of Islam. Beautiful calligraphy of Hujjat al-Islam overlaid on a scenic shot of a mosque, the calligraphy illuminated. His name became synonymous with the truth, embodying both the intellect and the heart of Islam. He showed that reason and spirituality need not be at odds. They can coexist in harmony, each one complementing the other. The rising sun over a mosque, symbolizing the lasting light of his legacy. To this day, his ideas echo in classrooms, mosques, and hearts across the Muslim world and beyond. A sunset over a calm desert. The silhouette of a scholar walking slowly, deeply lost in thought. Imam Al-Ghazali's life was not just a journey of intellect, it was the journey of the soul. Flashbacks of Al-Ghazali's life. Young student, professor in Baghdad, wandering ascetic, family man, and finally the humble scholar in Tus. From doubt to struggle, from reason to surrender, Al-Ghazali's path mirrors the struggles every soul faces in the quest for truth. A hand tracing the words of a manuscript, slow motion of a candle flickering, a scholar closing a book in peace. Through his life, we learn that knowledge is not just about the mind, but the heart. The truth is not simply discovered, it is felt, lived, and surrendered to. A close-up of a scholar's face, eyes closed in deep contemplation, followed by a wide shot of a peaceful landscape. As Imam Al-Ghazali once said, "He who knows himself knows his Lord." The sun setting, casting a golden light over a mosque. His legacy is a timeless reminder that the path to true knowledge is not just through books, but through self-reflection, humility, and sincerity. Fade to a simple call to action screen with the channel logo. If you've been inspired by the life of Imam Al-Ghazali, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of Muslim legends who walk the noble path.